You turn my mourning into dancing. You turn my mourning into dancing. 'Cause your love changes everything. Your love changes everything. You turn my mourning into dancing. You turn my mourning into dancing. You turn my mourning into dancing. 'Cause your love changes everything. Your love changes everything. Oh, there's something about your love. Something about your love changes everything in my body. Oh, something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. It changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. It changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. Changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. Changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. Changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. You turn my mourning into dancing. 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 Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything.
Good morning, Rooted Men. As per usual, I'm preparing right up to the last second. This verses today are really, to me, they're kind of a sticking point because I've seen them used wrong, and so I wanted to make sure I was right on these, but then I got all done looking at them, and I'm going, how does that affect us today? And that was the sticking point for me. And then about a half an hour ago, all of a sudden I thought, oh, this is a thought. Maybe this is what I can use. And so then I'm literally reading right up until the broadcast started. Wow. How about last night? All right. I've been to this study, wow, as long as I can remember. And every so often, the message is amazing. And I remember a couple years ago on Good Friday, the church erupted in a cheer at one point. And to me, that means the message is being heard and it's being listened to. I poke at Pastor Tom all the time. I mean, I love him to death. And last night was the perfect example of why he was a preacher and I was a truck driver. And I want, we can't discount just how good he is at what he does and how the Spirit works through him in his prayer and his sermons. So that was important to me because I'm pretty sure time's on here and I haven't looked yet, but it was amazing. It was, to me, it was to watch a man channel the Holy Spirit the way he did through his speaking and kind of sent chills a couple times. But that was yesterday. Today's a new day, and it's going to happen again tonight, I'm sure. So if you have a chance, to make sure at least online, but I'd love to see you there. Ken Gooch, good morning. Dave Donnelly, it's always a pleasure. And Chris Conley, good to see you. There's Tom. How you doing, Tom? That was excellent last night. Don't let me tell you otherwise. And Bert Reggiani. Chuck B's here. And Eric's here. Good morning, Eric. That's who I have in the comments. We have 14 people online, though, according to this. So that's a good sign, right? Okay, so today's verses. And, of course, I haven't shared them yet because I was reading up until the last second. But today's verses are from Galatians 2, verses 6 through 10. Very short, but I think it's important because there's something here that Paul tells everybody that we need to know. So let me share the screen. I got 4 or 5 of them up here. That's not good. All right. Let's see if okay, that worked. All right. So let's look at them real quick because I'm just going to read through it because it's all kind of one thought. As for those who were held in high esteem, don't you love how he talked? He talks this way about Peter and James and John and the disciples. Those who were held in high esteem, whatever they were, makes no difference to me. God does not allow favoritism, does not show favoritism. They added nothing to my message. For anybody that thinks that God only came for the Jews or the Jews' message was different than the message to the Gentiles, Paul says it right here. They added nothing to this. He came in and sat down with them, and they looked at what he was. He told them what he was preaching, and on the contrary, they recognized that I had been entrusting with the past task of preaching to the gospel to the uncircumcised. His message was the same. He says it right there, as plain as day. It says, on the contrary. Okay, now, on the contrary, they recognized that I had been entrusted with the task of preaching the gospel to the uncircumcised, just as Peter had been to the circumcised. For God, who is at work in Peter as an apostle to the circumcised, was also at work at me, an apostle to the Gentiles. James, Cephas, and John, those esteemed pillars, gave me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship when they recognized the grace given to me. They agreed that we should go to the Gentiles and they to the circumcised. All they ask is that we should continue to remember the poor and everything that I had been eager to do all along. The very thing I had been eager to do all along. Whew. Okay, let's bring out of that. All right, so Paul is being very specific here. He says, my message is the same as Peter's and James and John, because there was a group, the Judaizers, that were going around trying to integrate Old Testament law into the new Christian faith. They wanted the circumcision to be a part of everybody there. Never mind the fact that being baptized now, they need to be circumcised. And then for many, it was a stumbling mark, a point. You have people that have lived their whole life, and besides that, grown men get circumcised. Yikes! And on the contrary, they recognize that, okay, the important part here is he wanted to make sure the message was the same. That was Paul's goal here. He wanted to make sure he wasn't preaching something that wasn't true. He wanted to make sure that he was preaching something that Peter and James and John were preaching. And he wanted to make it clear that you can't add and pull and change the message from Jesus by the audience. He was not just some rogue teacher. He was running around. He wasn't running around teaching a different version of the gospel. It was you wonder, you watch it, you look at these verses and you think about it's all evangelism based, all of it. Everything he does, he's taking to the people, he's taking to others and show. Well, I got to thinking is this morning as I'm sitting here staring at my screen trying to figure out what I was going to talk about, and the Old Testament lessons, they don't talk a whole lot about evangelism. In fact, there's a lot of stuff where they separated themselves from others. There's a lot of stuff that, it seemed as though they were isolated. They didn't look for people to join their cause. They kept away from people, and they married within their family, and they did a lot of things. And that kind of piqued my curiosity a little bit, and I found on a Jewish website that said that God intended for Israel to be a source of light that attracted people to the truth, away from their pagan religions. It kind of sounds like the old saying, preach the gospel always, and if necessary, use words. They wanted to be a visible, attractive alternative to empty pagan beliefs and practices. And I thought to myself, well, that's beautiful, but how did they bring it to the masses? How did they take it to people? I mean, even in Exodus 12, there's a bit of scripture that says, when a stranger dwells within you and wants to keep the Passover of the Lord, let all his male be circumcised. That's a big ask for a stranger. I mean, you're this is a person that you're trying to share your faith with, and you're asking him to make a very extreme decision. Hopefully it wouldn't be at a moment's notice. And they let him come near. Okay, it says he wants to get the Passover with the Lord, let all his male be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it. And he shall be as a native. So they will, I mean, there is stuff here that, makes it sound like you can become a Jew. In Deuteronomy, I thought was the closest I could find. And it says, gather the people together, men and women and little ones, and the stranger who's within your gates, that they may hear and that they may learn to fear the Lord your God and carefully observe the words of this law. So there's that. I mean, and I found others like in Exodus where it said, out of Egypt, many people learned to follow God. Or in Canaan, Rahab, she learned to follow God. In 1 Kings, Queen of Sheba learned to follow God. Ruth learned to follow, Moabite learned to follow God. There's one after another examples like this, I guess. But the thing is, it wasn't as outward as what Paul did, what the disciples did, what everybody did. And it was just a curious thing that came to point is we sometimes think that our lives are filled with study and learning and prayer. And Jesus said, go. And how many of us choke? How many of us choke when they hear the word go. How many of us clinch up? I mean, we got the picture of the guy standing in our head, of the guy standing on the street corner with a megaphone yelling at people with a sign in his near, or we got the guy that comes to your door once a month and gives you these little flyers and pamphlets, and we all, those are pictures in our head, and we, and to be honest with you, the Watchtower guy and I are very friendly. He comes over and he knows my name. He remembers me, and we talk, and we don't agree, but we talk. Because I don't believe God ever meant for us to be isolated in our faith. And I think maybe that's what the Jewish religion did at that time. The Levitical law and all that stuff made them build walls instead of bridges, made them isolate themselves because they kept seeing the pitfalls to integrating into society. And so they just built things to keep them away. I don't know. I mean, this might have been a better set of scripts for Tom. I'm not sure. But anyway, it was a pleasure looking at it and sharing it with you. And Steve Skopak popped in on us. Good morning, Steve. It's always good to see you. And Pastor Tom, pat me on the back. Thank you, Pastor Tom. I appreciate it. I think I'm done. It was a pleasure. I hope to see you all tonight. Tuesday of the last week of Jesus' life. Should be awesome. With that, I will say my adieus and be out of your hair. All right. Have a firmly rooted day, gentlemen. And may someone see Jesus in you. Peace.